The boardroom buzzed with tension. Executives from both sides of the globe sat around a gleaming table, waiting for the billion-dollar deal to begin. David Wellington, the billionaire CEO of Wellington Industries, adjusted his tie and glanced nervously at the clock. The Chinese delegation had arrived on time, their expressions calm and unreadable. But one crucial person was missing: the Mandarin translator. David's team scrambled, whispering into phones and checking emails. No one could reach her. David's face turned pale. Without a translator, the entire negotiation was at risk. Millions of dollars, months of preparation, and the company's future all hanging by a thread. Just then, a soft voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, I speak Mandarin." Heads turned. Standing near the doorway was Jasmine Parker, the janitor. Her uniform was plain, her hand still holding a mop, but her eyes were steady, and her voice carried confidence. David blinked. "You speak Mandarin?" Jasmine nodded, fluently. The room fell silent. Jasmine's words hung in the air like a challenge. Executives exchanged skeptical glances. A janitor, fluent in Mandarin. Rebecca, the CEO's assistant, scoffed. "This is a billion-dollar deal. We can't risk it on someone with a mop." David hesitated. He looked at Jasmine, then at the Chinese delegation, who were watching with quiet curiosity. "Where did you learn Mandarin?" he asked. Jasmine replied calmly. "I studied linguistics at Howard University. Mandarin, Cantonese, and Taiwanese dialects." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Then why are you cleaning floors?" Jasmine smiled. "Because sometimes people don't see your worth until you show them." David took a deep breath. "All right, let's give her a chance." Jasmine stepped forward, placing her mop aside. The Chinese delegates nodded respectfully. The meeting was back on, but the tension hadn't left the room. Jasmine stood tall, her mop now leaning quietly against the wall. David gave her a nod, signaling the start of the meeting. Mr. Chen, the lead negotiator from the Chinese delegation, began speaking in rapid Mandarin. His tone was formal, his words precise. Without missing a beat, Jasmine translated fluently, her voice calm and clear. The executives leaned in, surprised by her accuracy and poise. David's eyebrows lifted. "She's good," he whispered to Rebecca, who crossed her arms in disbelief as the conversation continued. Jasmine didn't just translate, she interpreted tone, nuance, and cultural context. She even corrected a misused idiom, earning a respectful smile from Mr. Chen. The room began to shift. Doubt turned into curiosity, curiosity into admiration. By the end of the first hour, Jasmine had transformed from invisible staff to the most important person in the room. As the meeting progressed, Jasmine's presence reshaped the dynamic in the room. The Chinese delegates began addressing her directly, bypassing David and his team. Her translations weren't just accurate, they were strategic, highlighting cultural nuances and smoothing over potential misunderstandings. David watched in awe. Jasmine wasn't just translating, she was negotiating. Rebecca, still skeptical, leaned over to David. "We can't let her take over. She's just a janitor." David didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on Jasmine, who had just clarified a clause that could have cost the company millions. Mr. Chen smiled and nodded. "Your interpreter is very wise." Jasmine bowed slightly. "Thank you, sir. I believe clarity builds trust." The room was no longer divided by status or title. It was united by respect for the woman who had stepped out of the shadows and into the spotlight. As the meeting reached a critical point, Mr. Chen raised a concern about a clause in the contract. His tone sharpened, and the room tensed. Jasmine translated with precision, but also added context. "He's worried the clause implies unequal partnership," she explained. David frowned. "That's not our intention," Rebecca interrupted. "It's standard language. He should understand that." Jasmine turned to her. "Standard in the West, but in Chinese business culture, Wording reflects respect. This clause feels dismissive. Mr. Chen nodded in agreement. David looked at Jasmine. Can you suggest a revision? Jasmine thought for a moment, then offered a new phrasing, one that honored both sides equally. Mr. Chen smiled. Much better. Rebecca's face flushed. She was losing control, and Jasmine was gaining it. The janitor had just rewritten a $1 billion contract. As the meeting continued, Jasmine's insights became more than just helpful. They were essential. She anticipated questions before they were asked, clarified cultural misunderstandings, and even suggested strategic compromises that impressed both sides. David leaned back, watching her work. She's not just translating, he murmured. She's leading. Rebecca, growing more agitated, whispered to another executive, she's making us look weak. But the Chinese delegation saw something else entirely. Mr. Chen turned to David. She understands our values. She should be part of your leadership. David nodded slowly. She already is. Jasmine didn't flinch. She was focused, professional, and calm. Every word she spoke built trust. Every gesture showed respect. The janitor was no longer just saving the deal, she was redefining the company's future. The meeting neared its final phase. Contracts were being reviewed, terms finalized. Jasmine continued translating with flawless precision, but now, she was doing more than that. She was guiding the conversation. Mr. Chen leaned toward David. She understands our business better than your executives. Rebecca stiffened. She's not even on the team. David turned to Jasmine. How long have you worked here? 3 years, she replied. Mostly nights. I've overheard every major meeting, every deal, every mistake. The room went silent. Jasmine continued. I never spoke up. I figured no one would listen, but today, I had to. Mr. Chen smiled. You listened. You learned. That's leadership. David looked around the room. His executives were stunned. Rebecca was speechless. And Jasmine, she was calm, composed, and quietly powerful. The janitor had become the voice of the company. David leaned forward, intrigued. You've been listening to our meetings for years. Jasmine nodded. I cleaned this room every night. I heard every pitch, every negotiation, every mistake. I learned more here than any classroom could teach. The executives looked stunned. Rebecca's jaw tightened. That's invasive. Jasmine turned to her. No, it's observant. I didn't steal secrets. I absorbed knowledge. Mr. Chen chuckled. In our culture, wisdom often comes from silence. David smiled. You've been invisible to us, but you've seen everything. Jasmine's eyes didn't waver. I saw how people were treated, who was heard, who was ignored. The room shifted again. This wasn't just about language anymore. It was about power, perception, and the cost of overlooking brilliance. David leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. We've had talent sitting in this building for years, and we never noticed. Jasmine continued translating, but now her words carried more than meaning, they carried weight. Rebecca stood up, her voice sharp. This is absurd. She's not qualified to lead negotiations. Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow. She's already leading. The room fell silent. Jasmine turned to Rebecca. You don't have to like me, but you do have to listen. David nodded. She's earned that. Rebecca's face hardened. This company is built on structure, on hierarchy. Jasmine smiled gently. And maybe it's time we rebuild it on merit. The Chinese delegation applauded quietly. Respect wasn't demanded, it was earned, and Jasmine had earned every ounce of it. As the meeting wrapped up, Mr. Chen stood and extended his hand to Jasmine. You've earned our trust. We'd like to offer you a position at our firm in Shanghai. Gasps echoed around the room. Rebecca's face turned pale. David blinked. Wait, you're offering her a job? Mr. Chen nodded. Director of International Relations. She understands both worlds. Jasmine looked stunned. I didn't expect this, Rebecca snapped. You can't just leave. You're a janitor here. David interrupted. She's more than that. She's the reason this deal didn't collapse. Jasmine took a breath. I appreciate the offer, but I want to build something here where people like me aren't invisible. Mr. Chen smiled. Then let us help you do that. The room was no longer about titles or roles. It was about vision. Jasmine had just become the architect of a new future. After the meeting, David called an emergency board session. The executives gathered, still reeling from the day's events. David stood at the head of the table. We've been blind. Jasmine didn't just save a deal, she exposed our flaws. Rebecca, now visibly shaken, tried to defend herself. She's not qualified. She's not trained in corporate strategy. David raised a hand. She's trained in reality. And that's what we've been missing. Jasmine was invited to speak. She laid out a plan: mentorship programs for overlooked staff, language training for executives, and a new hiring model based on skill, not pedigree. The board was stunned. Her ideas were bold, inclusive, and brilliant. David smiled. Effective. Immediately, Jasmine Parker is our new Director of Cultural Intelligence. The janitor had rewritten the company's blueprint, and it was just the beginning. Jasmine's promotion sent shockwaves through Wellington Industries. Employees whispered in hallways, inspired by the janitor who had become a director. For the first time, the company's lower ranks felt seen. She didn't waste time. Jasmine launched a mentorship initiative called Hidden Voices, pairing executives with staff from overlooked departments. She hosted weekly roundtables where anyone, regardless of title, could pitch ideas. Rebecca, now demoted, watched from the sidelines. Her influence had vanished, replaced by Jasmine's quiet revolution. David addressed the company. We've learned that brilliance doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, it carries a mop. Jasmine smiled. Talent is everywhere. We just have to stop looking past it. The culture began to shift. Respect replaced hierarchy. Curiosity replaced judgment. And Wellington Industries began to feel like a place where anyone could rise. News of Jasmine's rise spread quickly. Media outlets picked up the story of the janitor turned director, calling her the voice of hidden genius. Social media buzzed with praise, and young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds found hope in her journey. Universities invited her to speak. Corporations asked for her guidance. But Jasmine remained grounded, focused on her mission. At Wellington Industries, she launched a scholarship fund for students in overlooked communities, naming it the Parker Promise. Her goal: to make sure brilliance never goes unnoticed again. David stood beside her at the launch event. You didn't just change our company, he said. You changed the way we see people. Jasmine smiled. I didn't do it alone. I just gave the unheard a microphone. The world was listening now. 6 months later, Wellington Industries had transformed. Employee satisfaction soared, profits climbed, and the company was now seen as a global leader in inclusive innovation. Jasmine stood at the center of it, all respected, admired, and unstoppable. Meanwhile, Rebecca's downfall was complete. Her discriminatory behavior had been exposed, and she was quietly let go. She watched from afar as the woman she once dismissed became a symbol of progress. At a major international summit, Jasmine delivered a keynote speech. We must stop measuring people by their titles and start measuring them by their impact. The crowd erupted in applause. David smiled from the front row. She didn't just change our company, he whispered. She changed the game. Jasmine had gone from janitor to global icon not by demanding power, but by proving she already had it. 1 year later, Wellington Industries had become a model of transformation. Its story was taught in business schools, and its culture had inspired a wave of change across the corporate world. Jasmine stood in front of a new class of interns, many from backgrounds once overlooked. She shared her story, Not as a fairy tale, but as a blueprint. Leadership isn't about titles, she said. It's about courage, clarity, and compassion. David had stepped down as CEO, choosing to mentor rising leaders. Rebecca had faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of arrogance. Jasmine, now the company's chief vision officer, walked the halls with purpose. Her mop had long been replaced by a mission to make sure no voice was ever ignored again, and every time someone doubted their worth, they'd remember the janitor who rewrote the rules.